This is a Sumerian Reed house. The same style that you see right here dates actually all the way back to 4000 BC, or some 6,000 years ago. The ancient Sumerians used to take the reeds from the Tigris and Euphrates that you see right in front of you and bundle them up tightly. They would build a rope that they would weave, and then they would wrap them around tightly into them. And in the process, they would create these poles that you see here, and the ones running up the front of it. And this has been found on tablets that they have that date back to nearly 4000 BC. And at that time, it doesn't look like it's anything that's brand new. It's not. It looks like something that they had been doing for a long time and knew what they were doing. And indeed, to this day, it still looks like that they've been doing this for a long time and they know what they're doing. These are some 30 foot tall by 22 to 25 foot wide by some 40 foot long or longer. It depends on however long they want to make them, is how long they do make them. And although there is some type of geometry they use in them, and then the poles that run up the sides of them, and in between each one you can have a doorway. You can connect these with smaller ones which look like personal huts, and then you can end up having a whole set of a bunch of rooms all built in together and eventually form something that looks much like a palace. In my scuba diving days, I'd gone to a lot of resorts and done things that pretty much were just like this here. And so let's look at a few more pictures of this, and I'll get into the idea to show you that this leads from here to Egypt and even the Mayan cultures and South American cultures, and it kind of shows how they all connect. And so this is one of the smaller structures that you see, and this could indeed connect some of the larger ones that you see together with each other. But if you notice, all these are built with a sacred arch, or with an arch that's in there, and it's indeed the first building and using of arches, it seems, that we have. And there's also stone arches that lead back to this time. But if you look at the pontoons here, they're real uniform running all the way up, but the ones on the side are much thicker, but then they get tapered off at the ends. And what they do to make these into boats is really just start preening back the end of it real hard and pulling on the thing, and then kept tightening and tightening and tightening it, and it makes it twist and bend up. And then that's going to be the front and the back of the boat. And they have to do it just right, so you don't have a boat with a butt sticking out one way or another. You have to run them through straight, and you have to do repeated sets of them and then band all those together. If you've been watching any of my recent videos, you've seen where I showed you how Thor Heyerdahl took one of these reed boats that they have, like the Sumerians and Egyptians had, and he actually took it all the way across. He left out of Morocco, so it would have been like somebody coming out of the Mediterranean, and once they come out of the Mediterranean, they just go left and down the coastline for a while, and then right where the currents meet, they can just peel out across and go across to South America. And indeed, he proved more than one time that you could actually do something like this, and that these boats that they thought were just for going up and down small river stretches were actually seaworthy. As long as they weren't caught into a giant hurricane or something, these things were quite seaworthy. Even some of the most ancient Sumerian tablets that we find show these little boats that they're on, that they even have seats and chairs onto them. But this is probably just a smaller, similar depiction. I'm sure the boat was a lot bigger than this little thing that he's in, and it shows how they're coming to a land. So when these people came to come visit the Sumerians, they were coming by boat. Now this could just be coming from up from the lower areas off the river to higher areas on the area, coming from lower stuff up to Nippur or one of these places, but it doesn't necessarily have to discern that they were actually from that exact land. The Phoenicians did quite a bit of this movement. They weren't from the lands that they were generally from either. Over time, they would make these reed boats to where there were actually two of them, and they had lashed them together, and then of course the area in between those, they could span that and put on areas and cargo and things like this. And it's believed that they, by building these little huts on top, the wind would push on them harder, and they would know that they moved across the lake a lot faster than the ones that did not, and therefore it might have been the precursor to the sail. All they had to do then was string up some fabrics and let it catch the wind, put the rudder on the end of it that they already kind of had perfected, and now they can really navigate quite well. In fact, they can go and make little islands like this and navigate back and forth. And indeed, a lot of Sumeria was passaged by canals and might look a lot like today's modern day Venice. It would have been nothing 2000 BC to much, much before that, seeing a giant Sumerian civilization during the floodplain time, where they were already pre-set up on higher areas, where you would find a whole town like this that was super navigated by people that had smaller reed boats and larger reed boats and would bring things back and forth. You can tell these are all those same Quonset hut type style structures. And indeed, here's one right here that looks just like the ones that we were looking at just shortly. And so I think we can find this stretching of a concept of that boat. You know, whenever you look at ancient civilizations, you try to find commonalities between things, and then I guess the common thing to do right there would be to try to find your way out of that. To say that, no, okay, well, how did they figure it out separate from these people? Why do they have the same similar traits? Indeed, in science, there's a term called convergence. It means where two separate things develop to be exactly the same. They find it in things like vine snakes, where in Africa there's a vine snake, and in South America there's a vine snake, and it would take a specialist to tell you which one is from which place, yet they aren't even actually related at all. But they have that exact same traits that they've pulled off to try to look like vines and mimic them, and in fact, even in their eyes and all their structure, you really can't tell. The Sumerians also had ancient round boats like this that they had sealed up with bitumen and things, and animal skins and so on, and in smaller scale than this. And this is one depiction of the boat that was used in the tale of Gilgamesh, and it tells you how big they made the boat. This was their version of Noah that predates the Bible that they had, and what it would have looked like, perhaps being more of a rounded object. Whenever you look at the actual statements that are given on the size of it and its cubit by cubit dimensions, not in the Bible but in the Sumerian tale, it seems to be something that's a little bit more squared off or rounded. I originally thought it was squared, but then looking at it, they had these boards that had angles and things onto them, and it only led to a round construction. Smaller dishes like this, though, were woven, and they're able to travel up and down rivers. They use them to this day, and it was the first Oriental style of boating that they had. And indeed, in the Sumerians, as I just showed you, that was one of the kind that they had before they had developed the longer prow type. Perhaps playing with little bits of water like you do with a kid running down into drains and things and dropping in longer sticks and seeing how they actually navigate the water better than something round, which is just kind of loose like a water ride or going down some rapids. That being able to aim yourself gave you a lot more speed. It's possible that some of these kids started developing those versus these round nut ones, and they found easily that they were able to beat the other ones in the race, and so that just took off from there. A lot of conjecture you can get out of it, but one thing is, all these cultures developed the same similar style eventually, and it probably has a commonality or a common origin. Indeed, some of these reed style boats that they have look very much like a Viking trawler. They have the points up in the front or the back. Quite often they have a face or a structure in the front, although I'm not sure what that thing is. It looks like maybe a mouse chicken. But anyhow, and you can see the pole going up for the masting and things that they have on this, and then they put fabrics across those and use that as a wing or a wind pulling device and be able to go around. And if you just look over to the right there, there's the ability to make a whole nother boat right there. There's another one behind them. You can make hundreds of boats each year out of each one of these piles or these growth stands that happen in the reed beds. You see them all through Egypt. You see them all through Mesopotamia. And then you really don't see them pretty much anywhere else in the world except for whenever you go here to South America. And once you come to South America, if you go up to Lake Titicaca, you'll actually see these exact same reed boats made under the same design, with the same style, the same reed concept, the same tweaking of the ends, arching and bending, the same pole structures that lead to the same sail structure that goes on to it, the way that they prow the back of them and everything. And you would have a hard time telling me which culture made him, or actually a person that was professional in this endeavor of being able to tell me which culture made them after you had them made. One of the easiest ways would be to genetically look at the reeds and then say, where did this reed come from? I'm not sure if people have ever done that and realized and found out that there might be reeds around the world that had been passed in primordial time somehow. And of course they would blame it and say that it was on the wind. And you look behind this guy, there's a broken down boat that can't even, it's not seaworthy anymore whatsoever right here, but he can make one in a matter of a few days that ends up being seaworthy, and it'll last for years. Let's take a look at this construction. So now we're on the shores of Lake Titicaca, and this is a reed boat that's been around for years that they have there, that they use whenever they want to go around and back and forth in the lakes. And you can see I've got a little tarp set over it here, but that's the exact same construction you see in the Egyptian and Sumerian builds. This is a mid-sized boat and a flat pontoon, and something that's made to carry a lot of weight on it right up there in that middle area. You could always build a hut on top of it too, but then again, that's also could be carrying a lot of cargo and things back and forth, perhaps stones, and things of that nature. Hint, hint. Now this is in a totally different land, but they still have reed beds. They still have swamps, and they still have people. It makes you wonder where these people got this idea from. You watch this guy and he's weaving and showing you how it's done here, and building and finishing off one of his pontoons, just one of them. And once he gets that pontoon done, then he makes rope. While he's waiting for the reeds to dry, he generally makes a lot of rope too, because it takes a lot of footing of rope here, you can see, but how he binds it up. And indeed, they can make a whole city out of this. The seats, the chairs, the tables, the houses, everything. The ladies that are there do a lot of crafting work and stuff. And this culture that you see here with these reed boats doesn't seem too much of a different culture than you would have seen in Sumerian, Phoenician, Egyptian reed boats. The oddity here is that we're thousands and thousands of miles apart on the other side of the world, and yet they have that same convergence, that same commonality with each other. Like, share, and subscribe, guys. Peace.